Hey everybody, welcome to this week's Q&As. It's a hot one today, so let's see if I can get through it without looking crazier than I've been looking these weeks. But anyway, let's jump right in. First up on Floatplane, Pete from mmonkey wanted to remind me that Arithmaldor, I never get the names right, I'm so sorry everybody, also has a Scart splitter. That's something that we talked about last week, and I forgot about that, which is really silly because I've also worked with Arithmaldor on similar projects and should have remembered that he had that. My bad, completely. So just go to his GitHub page and check out the Scart splitter if anybody is interested in one of those. But I'm also interested to see the other use cases that I talked about last week. So I'm not going to repeat myself and bore everybody to death again, but there were certain other solutions that a Scart splitter may not have been necessary. So hopefully everything got itself worked out, and thanks for the reminder, Pete. Now over to Patreon, and I'll start with the newest question first, just because. Jason Guffey said, I know this is a late post, so we don't have time to respond this week. That's cool. That's funny. I didn't read that before I just said that. Guess you got it in on time. The question is, I know you get asked this a lot because I've heard you mention it before, but can you talk a little bit about how you'd recommend shopping for CRTs in a COVID-19 world? Obviously, I could buy them off eBay, but I've never bought something like that and don't really trust it not to be damaged in transit somehow. I'm also unsure of something like Craigslist, given that I have to meet up with strangers that could be sick without knowing it. Yeah, I mean, or heck, I could be too. Fair. Another relevant thing I'm wondering about is CRT monitors. Are there any brands you recommend? I have an old video processing scaler that I'd like to integrate into my component consoles, but it only has a D-sub out connector. The primary output setting I use in the box is 720 by 480, so probably RGB HV. Could I use an RGB interface for this to take that signal from D-sub on my processor to RGB, outputting with BNC to RCA connectors over component? Would this even work? And if it did, would it introduce too much lag? Those RGB interfaces are pretty cheap, so I might pick one up just to play with, but it sounds like that might work. I should note too that I plan on outputting this to my OSSC. Would that work, or are these only meant to output to CRT displays? Okay, so that was two questions. It's one of the downsides of me reading these for the first time on camera. Second question. Whatever video processor you have, RGB HV and RGBS are only the way the sync signal is sent. So if you're sending a 31 kilohertz or 480p signal, then you're going to need some kind of other processor to convert it to RGB, and almost all of them add some kind of lag. There are some decent ones out there, the Choreo boxes, the Extron Emoshas, but the Extron RGB interfaces only convert the sync type. They do not convert the signal, at least the cheap ones that I'm talking about. So you would need a different kind of sync processor and a different kind of video processor, not just a sync processor. But back to your first question, what do you recommend shopping for CRTs, and is there any brands I'd recommend? Well, anything new, old stock, low hours on it is going to potentially be best, depending on the condition and all that other stuff. But just because it's new old stock doesn't mean the box hasn't been dropped or anything like that. But to be honest, it's a really tricky thing, and it's the exact same thing as asking, how do you buy a classic car online? And there's just so many factors into it. And I just worked with somebody about a week ago that was genuine. I mean, they did their best to provide all the pictures about a monitor to give the correct information. And we saw in the pictures that it looks like the red gun was looked like it was off or slightly going, and that really means replace the CRT. And the person who was selling didn't know. They weren't trying to rip anybody off at all, and it just so happened that the person who saw the pictures recognized the problem. So even if everybody involved in this is super genuine, there's always a risk. So the only hardcore do nots that I would recommend: do not buy from those eBay scalpers that I've talked about before. Do not buy from people on Craigslist that want to sell you a consumer grade 20-inch TV for $500. Just immediately take the business away from those people and let them sit on those monitors for a year trying to get $5,000 for them, and eventually they'll hopefully just change their tune and get rid of them at a normal price. And ask for lots of pictures. And if it's somebody that doesn't really know what they're doing, you might kind of just be stuck waiting for all this to blow over, so you could be able to go and check it out yourself. So it's kind of a rough situation, but lots of pictures, lots of things that you might recognize. Like for me, the screen with Link in Zelda Link to the Past, I've used that for so much testing. I could look at that screen and tell a lot about a monitor just because I'm used to seeing that. So lots of pictures, lots of stuff you'd recognize, and that's pretty much all you could ask for without going to see it in person. But any CRT is a win. Any. So if you pick up a consumer grade TV, use it with composite video, and then use your OSSC for when you want like the sharpest picture, maybe just use the consumer grade TV for nostalgia or light gun games or those Sega 3D games that I really like so much. Any VGA monitor would be awesome. If you're using it with a OSSC, you could set scan lines to 100% and it'll really look like an RGB monitor. I'm going to have a video all about that soon. So, I mean, basically just get yourself a CRT, and when you're spending a lot of money on one, you're going to have to do diligence and take a lot of pictures or get a lot of pictures and really bring it through people who are kind of used to seeing the stuff and know what to look for. So sorry there wasn't a better answer on that one. Kirk wants to know what games I'm playing at the moment. They recently purchased a Mister and feel a little overwhelmed with the choice of games to play. So, what games am I playing at the moment? Whatever I have to test to do whatever video I'm working on. I know it's really annoying to hear that, but that's the truth. Is my choice is to be able to sit down and play a game or to get all this work done and get these videos out. So I do enjoy making videos. I love RetroRGB and everything involved and all that stuff. So I'm not complaining, but you know, at the end of the day, when I'm usually running like 12 plus hours a day, if my choice is to go play a video game after I've been testing all day long, or to go like play guitar or read a book or watch TV or something, these days it's not video games anymore because it's my focus all day long, which I know that pisses people off sometimes, but it is what it is, and I'm still having a good time. But I do want to address your other point. You said you feel overwhelmed with the choice of games to play. So this is something people have talked about all the time, about ROM carts, emulation boxes, or I guess even modern consoles where you fire it up and you just have your long list of games on there, versus going to a store, picking out your cartridge or CD, checking out the game and deciding that's what you want to play. There's something, you get a little bit more invested in it that way. So my suggestion and what I've done in the past is to not look at the Mister or your ROM cart as, what game do I pick? I have so many choices. I would go out and specifically look for what game you want to play. And there's channels out there that really specialize in their recommendations. I mean, I think Metal Jesus has got to be the biggest, his Hidden Gems videos, which are, fun and silly to tease sometimes. He even teases them as well. I'm not throwing shade with that. I mean, the bottom line is it's somebody who's really good at describing their opinions about games. And with opinions, there's no right or wrong. So you just have to learn what games they like. And is that the same game you like? Is it not? I have friends and family that love a certain style of game that I don't. So if they say they love a game, I'll know that I probably shouldn't play it. And I mean that respectfully, of course. So I would really rely on people that, that have a good a good reputation, can't talk today, for recommending good games, or somebody that you enjoy watching their videos and get to know their likes and dislikes, and that way you could base your recommendations off of that. But I saw somebody when I tweeted actually about the Mister Core, the PC Engine CD core that was just launched, one of the responses was somebody who I follow and trust, and they said, anybody who hasn't played this game, you should definitely check it out. And I found a really neat side-scrolling game that was Japanese only, that was very hard, to the point where, in my testing of the Mister Core, I only got like 10 minutes to play it, but I didn't get very far in the game, but I enjoyed it. So that's kind of my suggestion for you there, is look for people that are good at recommending games, and then don't approach the Mister as, okay, what am I going to play? Approach it, mentally speaking. I'm going to get my snack adapter, my TurboGrafx 16 controller. I'm going to load up this one game, and now I'm essentially playing my TurboGrafx with this game installed, and that's it. And, just kind of approach it from that mindset and see if that helps. But that's certainly, when I do get the opportunity to play, that's certainly what I do. Ryan Rubel said they are a new owner of a Neo Geo AES version 3.6 and the jail bars are pretty severe. Yes, they are. They were looking at the RGB bypass guide on the website and noticed my final thoughts. I said there were some new RGB mods coming out, or new mods coming out in 2019 that pushed the analog signal even further. I'm not sure if I missed when they came out or if I had an update for said mods. So they never came out. Part of it was because of everything going on in the world, and part of it was because it was from a developer that tends to get sidetracked, and then a year or two goes by, and then they jump back into it. However, the good news is that mod for the AES 3.6 is super easy. A beginner with some patience could even do it. An expert could do it in like 2 minutes, and it's fully reversible. So just, save if you take out a component. I think you got to take out a capacitor or something. If you take them out, save them in a bag, label them. It's completely reversible, and it has nothing to do with the other mod that may or may not come out. Who knows these days? Because that other mod would be a lot more extensive, and it would render this one obsolete anyway. So I would absolutely suggest doing the mod that I listed, knowing that it's completely reversible, and the only downside is you lose composite video. But respectfully, if you care about jail bars, you're probably not going to be using composite video anyway. So that's definitely something to keep in mind. But yeah, great question. And as much as I'm teasing my friend who delayed this project, the truth is these are hobby projects, and most people don't have the opportunity to do this stuff for a living, and life does get in the way all the time. And I've seen more times than not people get 99% done with a project, but that last 1% is manufacturing, distribution, getting the money to do all that, having the supply chain ready, having the distribution and support once it comes in. So it's while I do tease my friends for taking forever for certain projects, it's legitimate. It's not like they're just sitting at home, blowing bubbles, staring at the ceiling. Life is actually happening. But definitely do that jail bar mod, and you're going to notice a huge difference. Nurtak, I think I'm saying that right. I hope I'm saying that right. First, they say, "Hi, I'm new here and not at all savvy on this, so please be kind." Well, first of all, I am always kind to anybody that takes the time to ask a question politely. If you open the question with "you're a liar and an ass and you're making up your things about lag," I'm probably not going to be very nice to you. But any question that's just phrased nicely, I'm always going to take the time to be kind about it, because it's ridiculous for people not to be. We want as many people enjoying retro games as possible, so I'm always happy to answer any question of any level. And if I don't know the answer, I'll never lie to you. I'll just be honest. But I think I know the answer to this question. Is there a difference in quality between using a Super NT and using a SNES with component or Scart through an OSSC? I get that one is official hardware and the other is FPGA, but I can't figure out if one gives a superior experience compared to the other. So your final statement is the most important one. I will answer the other ones, by the way, but will one give a superior experience compared to the other? That is completely up to you and your setup. If you're somebody who the aesthetics of things play into it, you want to see that same look, that same Super Nintendo that you looked at as a kid, or that, your friends and family or parents did, or whatever it is, like you're looking for that original console, then technically just using a Super Nintendo would give you the superior experience. If you don't own any of this stuff and you're looking for a really awesome way to play Super Nintendo games on a flat panel, but you don't own anything yet and you just want a good experience that doesn't add lag, one would argue that the Super NT is a better experience because you just buy it and plug it right in, and there's no messing with anything at all. So that's really up to you. But if you're talking about analyzing audio and video of things, things do get a little bit weird here, because if you analyzed it the way I do for my comparison shots, you will find that any solution that is digital to digital and never touches the analog realm will give a clearer and cleaner output than anything that went from analog to digital. However, if you have a good quality console, like a one-chip SNES or something, and you have it through an OSSC using custom timings, and you set the phase on it, I don't think on a 4K TV you will ever be able to tell the difference. And if you do, I don't think it's enough to take away from the experience. That you're talking specifically about Super Nintendo, though. So the opposite of that, if you had an original Genesis 1 and the Mega SG or the Mister, for example, and you plugged that Genesis 1 that's completely unmodified into an OSSC into your flat screen, you're going to see a lot of analog interference, whereas the two FPGA solutions, it's going to be crystal clear. So as a general rule, anything that's always digital is going to have less interference on the audio and video side. But if the original console's in good enough condition, it's not going to matter anyway. So like a triple bypassed Genesis versus the Mega SG. Yeah, I always get those wrong. Mega SG and Mega SD versus the analog console, the Capacitors console. If you have one that's triple bypassed versus that, I don't know if you'd be able to tell the difference anyway. So I think based on your question, what I would recommend is start with, what's the most important thing to you? A no-frills solution where you just plug stuff into your flat panel and you don't have to worry. Then the analog consoles are probably your answer. However, if using original controllers, original consoles, you could use the original controllers on the analog stuff, but maybe they're yours from childhood that you want to use on that original console that you owned. I would really look into using the original consoles then. So hopefully I didn't confuse things more. I just wanted to make sure I was clear. And when it comes to your question, there's no wrong answer. So the wrong answer would be, hey, I want to compete in video game tournaments and I'm going to be practicing on a Hyperkin HDMI Super Nintendo. That's the wrong answer. But the ones that you suggested are not either. So good luck to whichever one you choose, and let me know if you have any more questions. Demon Boy Jr. was hoping I could recommend a good quality cable to go from the analog DAC to either the G-Comp or G-Scart switch. They want to know if it's okay to trust the $3 monoprice cables that Analog has listed on their site. So I don't know about those cables. I've bought a few over the years. I don't know if it was the same link or anything like that, but I bought a few over the years that were wildly different quality. And in fact, I accidentally used one of the bad quality ones on my Mister once and went, what the heck's going on? Why is the component output so crappy? And then I swapped the cable out and everything was back to the way it should be again. So if you're looking for a solution that you know is just going to work and you don't have to worry about it and price doesn't really matter, get a good shielded custom cable from Retro Access. They could do right from the DAC to Scart and make it very easy. I think Retro Gaming Cables was looking into it, but I'm not sure if they actually made them yet. So I guess check their site first to see if they're in stock, and if not, then use the custom cable builder at Retro Access, or maybe they have them listed. I'm not really sure. Their site is changing all the time, but definitely check those two places first. And if those are too expensive or you'd rather have a different solution, I would just maybe buy two. And I know this stinks, but buy two cheap cables for $3 each, cut one of them open and see if they're shielded. I know it's a waste. Maybe save the pieces that you cut open if you ever want to make other cables. The other solution you could try is going for a VGA to Bnc cable. And those would be pretty interesting because those are mostly well shielded. I don't remember if I've ever seen one that was that was badly shielded or faked. A lot of these RCA cables have just they're not shielded. They just have a lot of foam around them to make them look thick and shielded, but they're not at all. So that's another option too. And then you could just use BNC to RCA connectors to connect that to your switches. The only thing I haven't tested yet though, so the scenario that you're describing, the analog DAC through either G-Comp or G-Scart to a CRT should work flawlessly. But if you go one output to the G-Scart and one output to the OSSC, I'm not sure if the OSSC will be able to detect that signal correctly. I can't remember. I know there was discussion about it. I can't remember if it was yes, no, or maybe. So just wanted to keep that, or just wanted to throw that out there in case that was something that you were really planning on doing. But I mean, the good news is if you already have an analog console, then if you're looking to go direct digital, you could just unplug the DAC and go right into your TV. So hopefully I was able to point you in the right direction. Gavin K had a few questions. First, do I have any recommendations for aftermarket power supplies? I've picked up a few consoles locally that either come with no power supply or a less than desirable one that causes issue with the pictures. So if you have a power supply like that, throw it straight in the garbage. It'll do nothing but cause trouble. Maybe it'll just give you a bad signal, or maybe it'll slowly kill your console. Toss that. I do like the Triad power supplies. So if you just go to Firebrand-X's website, he lists which one is compatible. Now, there's one that will plug directly into a Genesis, and for the Super Nintendo, you're going to need to buy the right power supply and the right pigtail adapter, or adapters. There might be more than one, but they're excellent quality, and the MD Fourier team has even found that they perform better than the originals sometimes. Now, that's on like a high-level audio testing graph, but just saying, they should be safe to use. The only unfortunate thing is you never know if they're going to change their production runs, change anything else. So hopefully there's going to be people in the retro gaming world that will stock these. So instead of buying them from like DigiKey, you could buy them from a place that every time they get a new batch, they could test one of them and make sure that they're still good. So that's definitely my recommendation. Just go to Firebrand-X's website, and he links right to his thread. Next, you own a PVM 14L5 and want to display my PC on it for emulated games. Will one of those HDMI to Ypbpr component video adapters work for it, since it supports 31 kilohertz? Or should I look at something more complicated like a sync combiner? No, I would go HDMI to component, and that should be perfect. As long as you set your computer to 640 by 480, everything should be totally fine, and that should be all you need. If for whatever reason you specifically need RGB, get an HDMI to VGA, and then either build or buy a sync combiner to go from RGB-HV to RGBS. But I mean, the component adapter should work perfect. And last question, I was doing my research into the Mister. Is there a good resource for getting started in 2020? I'm not sure what add-on boards people may want, how much RAM, etc., and I'm having trouble on where to source said boards as well. MrAddons.com, definitely where I would recommend going. There's other sellers that sell in smaller volume that are very good too, but MrAddons.com is really trying to tackle all of this stuff. My personal recommendation, if you're going to use, if there's ever any slight chance of you wanting to use CRTs, original controllers, or really anything that might not just be a USB controller into HDMI, get an I/O board. It's going to add a lot of functionality to it. And my personal opinion is I would just get the largest RAM module available, which I believe is 128 megabytes now, not megabits, megabytes. And the reason for that is you could get away with buying a smaller one that should work with everything, and you might not ever need more than the smaller one, but I just want to buy something once. And, depending on your budget and everything, maybe buying something for $30 now and then buying something again for 90 or whatever later on, maybe that's totally fine. But for me, I would rather just have it, not have to worry about it, and go with the largest RAM module. And after that, anything after that is just preference. Are you going to be using original controllers or wireless? Are you going to be using light guns? And that's a whole other discussion. So if you would like the answers to those, please ask any of those questions, and I'll get to it next week. Bad Reality says they own a Model 1 Sega Genesis. They'll be restoring it, and they want to know if they reflow solder and recap everything, including the power supply, should they invest and install a triple bypass board? I have an opinion on this, but it's just an opinion. I think that if you already have everything set up, if everything's recapped and it's working good enough for you, you already own your cable that gets stereo from the front jack, maybe you did the pin lift for the subcarrier, then, maybe leave well enough alone. But if you're somebody that likes to chase the best signal from original consoles, which it sounds like you do because you're going to be taking the time to restore it, I would add a triple bypass to the Model 1. I love that it uses the Model 2 DIN so that you don't have to mess around with, cables running around the front of your Genesis. You don't have to mess around if you're using a 32X. You just treat it like a Genesis 2. There should be instructions coming out relatively soon that allow you to re-enable the front headphone jack if you want to just actually use it for headphones and not just run it through your TV. And that's something that you could complete this mod and be done and then go back later on and do the headphone mod. You don't have to do it all at the same time. And I also really like the fact that you're bypassing aging components with newer ones. And there is the bonus that on some Model 1s, you'll get much less of a hum than if you're using the original built-in audio. When I say much less, with headphones on and the volume turned up, you probably wouldn't notice through a TV speaker. Other models of the Genesis one, it's going to be the same, but the fact that it's an equal to or better than experience, and the fact that, you could probably get a slight performance increase in every model of the Genesis with it makes it worth it to me. But Genesis ones are a pain. You have to add those power decoupling SMD caps to the board. There was that one spot Voltar found. There were the 2 spots underneath that Jose found that really did help, at least on a model VA2. So it's one of those things where you just have to decide about your total use case. For plenty of people out there, they don't even care about the jail bars because they're using composite video. So doing a full recap, it's more than enough. That now you'll have a extra long-lasting console. For a lot of people, simply lifting the subcarrier pin disables composite video. But now, it looks great. It's not perfect, but it's certainly wildly better than without the pin lifted. And then there's the crazy of us like me that, I really do see the difference, and it really is important to me because I want to be able to use that original console with the original cartridge on a CRT and not have interference. So just my opinion on that one, but I would do whatever you feel is best for your setup. Jordan Chaston has a couple of questions. I might split the answers up depending on if I mess up. I'm going to go back. I'll try to go through them. Number 1, has anyone been able to install the high-def NES and NES RGB in the same system? No, I don't think that it's possible at all because of the way they take over the PPU. There might be a way to do it where you could switch between one or the other, but at that point, I don't know if that would be the best option. If not, can high-def NES output 240p over HDMI that I could send through an HDMI to VGA and Sync Combiner? No, but I really wish it could. I've been bothering everybody that makes HDMI devices. Kevin, Bunny Boy, I've been bothering everybody to do that. And even if it's not 320 by 240, even if it's like 1535 by 240 or whatever super resolution needs to be sent in order for the HDMI clock to be high enough, it's the bottom line would still be that if you're using a CRT, not a capture card or a digital display, it's all the same. So no, but I really wish Kevin would think about doing that because I think that would be a really amazing solution. And I'm also trying to convince a friend of mine to make a HDMI to Scart adapter for this exact reason. So, if these updates would happen, you could have just plugged it in, but none of that exists yet. So fingers crossed. 2, can you recommend a video or guide for triple bypass and full compatibility restoration for Genesis Model 3 VA1? I would check out the Genesis 3 page on RetroRGB. I would check out the video that I just posted on the triple bypass because that's 4K video of all the installation points. And that's it for now. However, the wiki is coming pretty soon, and one of the things that's going to be the first to be posted is info on the triple bypass. So, life got in the way. I was just earlier teasing a friend about not getting the Neo Geo project done. This is my own project that's been taking years. So sorry about that, but that's the best way to do it right now today is check out what's already out there and kind of figure through it yourself, or just wait a little while longer and hopefully detailed guides would be posted. 3, I read about some board or revision of Ultra HDMI to allow easy installation alongside the boardy N64 RGB mod. Do you know what I'm talking about? So I don't know that it's an Ultra HDMI revision. I think what you're talking about might have been a flex adapter that Boardy designed that allowed for that to happen. So I would just check out Boardy's GitHub and maybe do some research on that. But I completely forgot as well. Sorry. And 4, do you know if there are plans for those new Retro Fighters and N64 Dreamcast controllers to have wireless versions? I do not, and I hope they don't do it unless they put in some real effort to making it low lag wireless. Because, controller lag on top of emulation lag, if that's what you're using, on top of display lag, if you're going to a flat panel, that's a lot. when you add it all up. And even if you're using original consoles on a CRT, I don't like to see any lag in consoles that were designed without it. So I hope they come up with it, and I hope they do a great job making it as little lag as possible. I guess you ended it with some kind words, so thank you very much. I appreciate it. And hey, I was able to get through all your questions in one shot. Ryan says, hey Bob, if you were to start all over and redo your current retro setup, what would you change? Ooh, good question. They're looking at finally getting theirs started and wanted to know what lessons I've learned. So would Scart connectors be the best idea? Would you get a flat panel and a BVM or just a regular CRT? So the good and the bad news is I can give you some recommendations, but it's going to come down to what you need and what your setup is. Do you have room for a CRT? If the answer is yes, get any CRT, any one of them. A consumer grade, or an RGB monitor. Get a consumer now and hold on to it until you someday get an RGB monitor, if that's what you even want. If you have a room for a CRT, that's number one always, because you don't even need RGB or component if you just want an accurate experience with no lag. Composite on a CRT looks totally fine. But if you are chasing a sharp signal, I would try to find any CRT with the higher quality inputs like S-Video component, or of course if one could be modded for RGB. So that would absolutely be number one, is concentrate on the CRT and then go from there. If you find a CRT with component video inputs, I would try to get all component cables. HD Retrovision, Retro Gaming Cables has some too, and get a G-Comp switch and put it all through that. If you get an RGB monitor with RGB inputs, I would go all Scart into a G-Scart switch and kind of go from there. If you can't have a CRT and you need some kind of processor, then I would decide how much work do you want to do. Do you want to just plug something in? Then the Rad2X. Do you want one device for many things, but you still don't want to mess with anything other than like filters and scan lines? Get the new RetroTink products, the 2X Pro or the 2X Scart. Or are you willing to go through the trouble of setting the phase on each of your consoles? You only have to do it once per console, but you still got to do it. Of dialing in custom profiles every time you switch consoles. So if you're playing NES, and you want to switch over to Genesis, you got to go to the OSSC remote and switch profiles. But it's a higher quality video signal overall. So is that okay? Would you be willing to do that? Then get an OSSC and the G-Scart switch and everything. So you got to look at your own setup. And that's why I don't have like a definitive guide for starting in retro gaming. I'm working on something like that, but it's essentially what I just told you, in that you have to figure out what you want for your setup, what you've already bought or what you will be buying, and then kind of plan around that. There's no like easy answer of just buy this cable and this processor and you're done forever. Like, it all depends on your setup. But once again, to sound like a boring repeating drone, if you get a CRT, there is no wrong answer to this. I mean, I guess technically if you have a flat glass CRT, you might have some issues with light gun games. So keep that in mind. But if that doesn't matter to you, or if you could find a curved glass CRT, there is no wrong answer. A lot of people misunderstand and think I look down upon people that play in composite video. It's not at all true. Composite video on a CRT is totally fine. Composite video direct into a flat panel is terrible. You need some kind of scaler, even composite into a RetroTink 2X into a flat panel. But hopefully I was at least able to point you in the right direction. And if you let me know exactly what display you're planning on, because you said you're looking to include a flat panel and a BVM, but I don't know if you actually bought one yet. So please let me know, and I could kind of elaborate a little more from there. DK Devil said they've been putting together a retro game console collection, and they're looking to have a single HDMI out per console. For the N64 and Dreamcast, they can get the internal HDMI mods. For some older systems, they're turning to FPGA solutions. And for a handful of them, Saturn, TurboGrafx, Neo Geo, they're thinking of using Rad2X cables. Excellent choice. So, with context out of the way, they have two questions. Rad2X cables take a 240p or 480i signal and push out a 480p signal. 480p is functional for now, but I've heard some newer 4K TVs may have issues with it. Now, I don't think that's true, but all right. Could I use an upscaler like the upcoming OSSC Pro to take this 480p digital signal from the Rad2X and blow it up to a clean 1080p? So, yes, but just like I explained just a second ago about the other question, you have to decide on which solution do you want. Do you want something where you turn it on and that's it? That's the only setup. Then yes, that would be a perfect solution. A Rad2X going into any HDMI scaler that does not add lag would improve the signal. I actually think, to be honest, I tested the Rad2X on a lot of TVs, including some really cheap ones and some expensive ones, and I thought it did a perfectly fine job on all of them. But if you really want a noticeable difference, you're going to need to load up profiles for every console, go RGB to a switch to the OSSC, and that's not as simple as what you're talking about. I always say that with almost a negative sound in my voice. I do that, and I think it's worth it to me. But most people, it's not. It's just, you're not going to notice so much of a difference that you have to flip through all that stuff. That's why stuff like the OSSC is an enthusiast product, and I love it. I recommend it to all enthusiasts. But I mean this nicely, if you're just a gamer that wants to play games and doesn't want to mess around with it, I don't even know if I would put a scaler in front of the Rad2X or RetroTank. I would just use it. It doesn't give a bad solution at all. It's just not as sharp as others. Your last question, GameCube, PS2, and original Xbox have been less obvious to find a solution for. GameCube has the GC video products like the Srgb, but these don't always push out 480p. Nope, that's... Oh, okay, I see what you mean. You said, is Swiss my only bet for getting everything out of the GameCube at 480p? Yeah, some games natively don't output 480p, but please keep in mind that the Srgb will deinterlace 480i to 480p. But you're right. I would use Swiss to force everything into a 480p mode. It's my personal opinion that I would always launch almost every game through Swiss just so that you could have everything configured. You could save your settings so that every time you load that same game, it keeps your settings so you don't have to worry about this stuff. So yeah, I would do that for GameCube. The Srgb, load everything with Swiss, force it to 480p. And best HDMI solutions for the original Xbox and PS2. Original Xbox, the Chimeric Systems one, is definitely what I would suggest at the moment. I did that video on it. Please check out the Xbox plug and play video. It's recent too, so you could just scroll right through the YouTube feed. But for PlayStation 2, that's where it gets a little tricky. I would watch the PlayStation Rad2X video for a detailed explanation. Excuse me. But the bottom line with that is, at the moment, there is no adapter that will deinterlace 480i and pass through 480p. So the suggestion I usually have is people get, if 480p on a PS2 is really important, you have to decide what games you want. So sorry, I'm fumbling over my words here because there's a lot involved and I'm trying not to repeat everything I said in the Rad2X video. You have to take a look at the games you want to play. And if your favorite PlayStation 2 games are 480p compatible, then you might be stuck with two solutions. One that just like the HD Retrovision component cables for 480p, and then the Rad2X for 480i. However, if most of your PlayStation 2 games that you want to play are native 480i, just use the Rad2X and leave the smoothing filter on, and you have a 480p solution that looks pretty good in my opinion. There are talks of potential solutions coming out for the PlayStation 2, but I don't know if it's less than a year away. And the Rad2X you could use on other stuff anyway, so I might consider doing that just as a temporary solution. But PlayStation 2 is the only one that there's no perfect solution today. There's no perfect one solution today. So a Rad2X and then a set of HD Retrovision component cables through a super cheap component to HDMI converter, that is a perfect solution, but it requires swapping stuff around. But there will be an internal HDMI mod for the PS2, and there will be other plug and play stuff that might help it a little bit more. So maybe consider that. Maybe consider a solution now temporary, and then get the other solution in the future. Adam Wells has an interesting question. They said that their Model 1 Sega Saturn recognizes regular Saturn controllers just fine, but when they plug in either of their 3D controllers or the 2.4 GHz wireless receiver for the RetroBit controller, it doesn't recognize either. All of these controllers work fine on my Model 2 Sega Saturn. So that's not normal. So I would clean out the port just in case, but it could be a power supply issue because maybe it's not getting enough power to those controllers. But that's something that I don't think I would know how to give good recommendations for that. I've never run into that, and that could be a multitude of different things, from a leaky cap damaging a trace to just a dirty or bent pin inside the controller port to your power supply needs to be recapped. So depending on your level of technical expertise, recapping your Saturn is never going to be a bad thing because, that's breathes longevity to it. Maybe do that and cross your fingers. Well, I guess first step would be try cleaning out the port and checking for bent pins. Is it both port 1 and 2? Or is it, just one port that doesn't access the receivers? If that's the case, if it's both ports, then it's probably not going to be a dirty port. So then I would think about capacitors and, of course, just open it up and see if there's something physical. But if you have a damaged trace, I mean, that's something that really is an expert level repair. So sorry, I don't have an easy fix for you, but I would just be cautious on that one. And, it could be a lot of different things. Alex Shemai has a good question, and once again, the answer is probably going to be terrible. Is there a simple way to test component cables for quality and sufficient shielding? They have the HD Retrovision cables and another made by a different company they got off Amazon. The different company ones seem fine, but they doubt they have the eye to tell the difference. They also don't have a capture card to aid in a side-by-side comparison. Can the difference be quantified by using some tools? No, but there's a few factors in this. Badly shielded cables won't hurt anything when it comes to component video cables. So using bad cables aren't going to lower the life of your console. It's not going to change the voltage. It's not like using a badly made Scart cable with no components in it that's sending high voltage to a scaler. It's just going to add interference. So if you have those other cables and you don't notice any interference and you don't hear any buzz on the audio lines, I guess one test I always do is whenever there's a white screen, like any Konami game for Genesis or Super Nintendo, whenever that Konami logo comes up and the screen's all white, for a few seconds while the screen is still lit but there's no sound, if you hear a loud buzz, then shielded cables or your cables probably need better shielding. There's going to be a buzz there, but a loud buzz, either that or some noticeable interference. If it's not that, the only way to test would be to really cut them open and see if they're actually shielded. And even then, you could have broken cables that are shielded but not connected properly on the ends. So this is one of those rare moments where I could honestly say if it looks and sounds fine to you, don't worry about it. It's not going to hurt anything in the context of component video cables like this. And you had a follow-up from last week regarding the 720p versus 480p input lag on the original Xbox. They tested another game, MX vs. ATV Unleashed, and did not experience the difference in input lag. So what I mentioned earlier about the game's implementation of 720p might have been the culprit. Now, once again, that was just speculation, but it might just be that rendering in the higher resolution caused slowdown because it put more processing power or required more processing power from the CPU and GPU. That's just my guess, and I think that based on what you just said, that makes sense. And MX vs. ATV Unleashed is one of the games I tested when I was testing the Chimeric adapter, and I definitely didn't notice any kind of lag difference between resolutions. So thanks for following up, though. I was really curious about that. Okay, that's it for this week. Hopefully I don't look too crazy. It's over 80 degrees in here, and I obviously can't have windows open or the AC on when I'm recording these, or else it would be deafening to listen to. So hopefully I don't look like too much of a nut job. Also, as always, thank you to everybody for participating in these. I really enjoy doing them. I love the interaction between supporters. And if you're new to all this, please ask any question at all that you have wherever it is that you support. The way these things work, I can't really go back to older posts, so please just take the newest support post and ask your question there, and I'll get to it next week. I don't answer Q&A questions in the YouTube comments. I answer a ton of YouTube questions on other videos, but respectfully, this is just a thank you to the people that support and an interaction between us. So if you are a supporter, make sure to ask the question wherever it is that you support, not in the YouTube comments. Also, as always, thank you very much to everybody that supports and is a part of these. You're keeping all the research and all these crazy videos going. So thank you all very much. And I'm going to go take a second shower.